You guys have picked up that forgiveness as our theme, right? Now, I hear the most typical message that I hear around forgiveness. The big question is, should I forgive? What will it mean for me to forgive? Can I choose not to forgive? Those questions I'm going to dive into next week, so I invite you to come back. I feel like the second most question that people ask about forgiveness is, will I be forgiven? That's also an important question. But today I want to focus on the soul wrestling work. What is the soul wrestling work when one knows that one has breached one's values and broken relationship and is desperately in need of forgiveness? What does that work look like? And there's an ancient story I want to share with you. It's from the book of Genesis. It's the story of Jacob. Now, you might know Jacob. He is one of the 3 generations of founding patriarchs for the Jewish faith. It always goes Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And you'd think for someone who was named so regularly that he would be a great role model, someone whose example we should live by, but most of his life was nothing of the sort. Jacob built his success upon taking advantage of others. In fact, his name means to supplant, to grab hold of someone's ankle who's ahead of you. And that's exactly what happened when he and his twin were being born and coming out of the birth canal. Jacob didn't work hard. He held onto his older brother Isaac's ankle and let Isaac pull them both out. But that wasn't the final story of supplanting Esau, his older brother. Esau was a great hunter and warrior and the light of his father's eye. And as firstborn, he was given the birthright of leadership, the responsibility of helping care for and grow the fortunes of his family and tribe, and the responsibility to look after and care for others. But one day, after Esau was hunting for days to feed his family, he comes back and he's famished and weak and needs nourishment. And there's Jacob cooking this delicious lentil stew. And Esau looks at his brother and goes, "Brother, let me have some food." And Jacob stirs and he says, "If you give me your birthright." And his brother goes, "I'm going to die if I don't eat. Sure, take the birthright, just give me some food." And Jacob gives him the food and takes the blessing of the birthright. And then later, years later, as Isaac, their father, approached death, he knew it was time to formally transfer the blessings of the role of the patriarch to his older son Esau. And he sent him off to prepare the final meal for his father's transition. But during this time when Esau was out hunting and doing his responsibilities, Jacob, with the help of his mother, snuck into his father's tent, deceived him, and took Esau's blessing. Now, this blessing isn't just kind words, something that one father says to a son to say, "You can do this." It wasn't even just a blessing of saying, "I wish you to have all the goodness of life, ease and prosperity and security." No, it said, "Everyone in your family will bow down to you. You will take my flocks. You will take my possessions. Your word will rule." When Esau came back and discovered that Jacob had taken this blessing for him, and his father had no blessing left to give him, he was enraged. And he, being the mighty warrior and hunter, planned to kill his brother Jacob once their father's passing had occurred. So Jacob went off. He left. He had no courage. He didn't have any intention or skill about how to make this right. And so he went to live with his uncle, his mother's brother. And there you could think he would have a fresh start. But he continued the path of growing strong by taking from others. He won not only the loyalty and love of his uncle Laban's 2 daughters, but their loyalty. They switched their loyalty from their father to Jacob. And he also gained so much of the hawks and the flocks and herds of Laban's livestock that Laban's sons used to say, "There's nothing left for us. How will we feed our children? You've taken our birthright from our father." Now, Jacob began to grow nervous. He knew he had overstayed his welcome. And so, just like his examples in the past, he leaves in the middle of the night. He runs off with his 2 wives, Laban's daughters, and all the livestock. And Laban chases after him with a whole armed horde. And with the help of Rachel, Laban's beloved wife, he tricks Laban into thinking, maybe I can't punish Jacob. And so they take some rocks and build a cairn. And they say, here is a truce point. We don't trust each other. But this cairn will say, we will not cross into each other's lands if we intend to do harm. It's not a reconciliation. Now, what do you do when you've taken from and betrayed and stolen not only security but love from not only your birth family but your chosen family, not only your father's family but your mother's family? Where can you go? There is no path that leads anywhere fruitful except the path of forgiveness. And so Jacob starts to head home. And he sends word to Esau saying, your brother tends to return home, and he's bringing all these flocks and herds of livestock. Wildlife too, that would be cool. And a wife and children. And Esau, what do you think of this? And the word comes back, I am gathering 400 armed men with which to greet my brother. And Esau clearly has not forgotten that pledge to extract retribution and vengeance. And Jacob says, I have to split my family and split my herd so that way maybe one can survive when we're attacked. And he sends some gifts, some of his flocks ahead as bribes to his brother, like, please take these 20 goats and maybe you'll forgive me. And he sends them all off, and he sits there alone in the wilderness. I'm sure you could imagine with me his fear and his uncertainty about what's to come, and how will he survive or trick his way out of this one, or what will happen to his family, his wives and children. Now, up till now, the biblical text had spent a long time detailing all the things that Jacob had done wrong, all the harm that he had incurred. The text did this, the authors did this, so we were really clear that Jacob was not innocent. He really had harmed. And then the text says, a man came and insisted on Jacob wrestling with him all the night. So Jacob wrestled with this man all through the night, and Jacob could not conquer this man, but nor could the man throw Jacob to the ground. In fact, The struggle was so fierce that the man pushed Jacob's hip out of its socket. And still Jacob refused to let go. And the man said, "Dawn is coming." We were only going to wrestle the whole night. "And dawn is coming. Let me go." And Jacob said, "Not until you give me a blessing." And so this man said, "I will give you a new name. You will no longer be Jacob the supplanter, but Israel the blessed." Jacob held on until he earned his own blessing. He earned his own blessing. Now, I want us to pause here in the story because this moment of wrestling is the crux of the whole story. It's such a small part, but it is the place where Jacob faces uncertainty and courageously makes a choice. He makes a choice to wrestle, and to wrestle through struggle and frustration and pain until he receives a blessing. Now, I think when you study the Bible, it's full of metaphors. You want to know why stories are so much more memorable than enduring. And I think this was a metaphor of wrestling with all the harm that he had done. Harm to Esau, harm to Laban, harm to his family, and how he had failed to live the values that he was raised by. To be mutual, to live in mutuality, to not take more than one needs, to allow others to sustain themselves, to respect one's elders and one's father, to respect family. When I think about the moments when I have gone into that soul-searching wrestling, it's because I too have recognized that I have hurt or harmed someone, that I did something to them that was unkind or had an impact to them, but also that I had failed to live the values that I wanted to guide my own life. And so the breach was twofold. We say in covenant that as we move towards our values, we also move towards being in right relationship with people. And when we break living our values, we also break relationship. When we break relationship, we often break our values. What does this wrestling look like? For me, it looks like those moments when I really am wrestling with questions about why I did the thing I did and what its impact was. I ask myself questions like, am I unkind? Was I selfish? Was I courageous? And part of my ego and my sense of self pushes back. Oh, you didn't really mean to do that. I lean into the pretense of good intentions. Or it wrestles back with denial. It surely wasn't that big of a deal. I bet they've even just forgotten about it. Maybe they even learned to be resilient through that. Or I go into self-pity. Well, yes, I did that, but now look how painful and upset I am. Move after move, I have to wrestle with myself. And so what one needs to do is hold on tight to the struggle, to be honest about oneself, to recognize all the different moves that are trying to allow you to disengage from the moral struggle. But our moral faith says that we can courageously engage. We can hold on until there's no other move that our opponent has. In fact, till they say, there's no other argument we could have about why what you did was all right. You hold on for the state of blessing. See, when you hold on that tightly to your values, It's a recommitting to yourself to live by them. It's also a kind of renaming of yourself. I will be someone who could truly be known as friend, as beloved, as someone to be counted on, as trustworthy, as honest, as generous. These are names that we're known by, qualities of who we are. They also shape how we move in the world. Remember how Jacob had his hip affected? As he moved forth from that wrestling, the way he moved in the world was observably different. When we wrestle with our values that fiercely and we commit to live by them, the way we move in the world looks different. In fact, this wrestling that we do alone, sometimes for hours and sometimes in little bits over different days or years, they will change how we move in the world. In fact, they make us worthy of seeking forgiveness. So what happened to Jacob? He went from this wrestling. In fact, he gathered his wives and flocks together, and he went to meet the 400 armed men standing with Esau. And as they approached, they bowed down before Esau, just like his father's blessing would have originally asked them to do. And Esau looked at Jacob, bowed down, and Jacob said, all of these things that I have are yours, just as they were originally meant to be. And Esau stepped forward and lifted up his brother and embraced him. Hugging, they leaned into each other. Crying, they stared into each other's faces. And Jacob said, looking at Esau, I am looking into the face of God. So powerful is that loving forgiveness. My dear ones, when we wrestle with our faith, when we wrestle with what we've done wrong by failing our values, by breaking relationship, when we wrestle to truly know ourselves and the impacts of what we've done, when we hold on to the blessing that occurs when we can recommit to our values and have them shape how we move through the world, then we become worthy of reconciliation. When we move into reconciliation, we discover the values of beloved community. And so I urge us to not be afraid of the wrestling, but courageously hold on, and to think about how we move in the world and the values we live by and the people who call us forth. Let us go into a time of reflection as we move through our service.